Water changes the shape of a region long before roads, borders, or skylines arrive. Stand on a high shore above Lake Superior, and the horizon can look like open sea. Move to East Africa, and a chain of Great Lakes follows a crack in the crust of the planet itself. Fly north over Canada, and the land breaks apart into a mosaic of blue, thousands of lakes left behind by ice. Cross Finland, and water seems to appear in every gap between forests, towns, and rock. These are not just large lakes. They are systems connected by rivers, straits, wetlands, climate, geology, and human movement. They store heat, feed cities, shape trade, guide migration, and create entire ecological neighborhoods that would not exist without them. What makes the biggest lake systems so important is not only their size, it is the way they work together. And a single lake can be dramatic. A lake system can redirect economies, influence weather, and sustain millions of people across huge distances. Once you start seeing lakes as linked machinery instead of isolated pools of water, the map changes. The water is not sitting there. It is moving, filtering, circulating, freezing, eroding, and carrying life with it. And in some parts of the world, those linked waters have become the defining architecture of the land itself. The clearest place to begin is North America's Great Lakes, because few inland water systems on Earth operate at such scale. Superior, Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario form one connected chain stretching deep into the middle of the continent. Together, they hold about 84% of North America's surface fresh water and around 21% of the world's surface fresh water. And that is an astonishing figure for 5 lakes connected by channels and controlled in part by gravity. Water flows generally from the higher western lakes toward the lower east, moving from Superior through the St. Mary's River into Huron and Michigan, through the Straits of Mackinac, then down through the St. Clair River, Lake St. Clair, the Detroit River, Lake Erie, the Niagara River, Lake Ontario, and finally the St. Lawrence system. This is not a cluster of separate water bodies. It is a stepped freshwater corridor across roughly 750 miles of the continent. Superior dominates that chain by sheer mass. Its water area is about 31,700 square miles, making it the largest freshwater lake in the world by surface area, and its maximum depth reaches 1,332 feet. Because it is deep and cold, Superior responds slowly to seasonal change. It stores winter cold longer than shallower lakes and warms more gradually in summer. That thermal inertia matters. It affects fog, lake effect snow, shipping seasons, fish habitat, and even the feel of coastal communities along Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Ontario. When you look at Superior on a map, you are seeing one of the continent's biggest climate engines disguised as a lake. Not all of the Great Lakes behave that way. Erie, for example, is much shallower, especially in its western basin, where the average depth is only about 7.4 meters or 24 feet. Shallow water heats faster, cools faster, and gets stirred more easily by wind. That is one reason Erie is more productive biologically, but also more vulnerable to problems such as algal blooms and turbidity. Ontario, farther downstream, is smaller by surface area but much deeper, with an average depth of about 86 meters or 283 feet, and a water retention time of about 6 years. Huron has the longest shoreline of the Great Lakes, and Michigan and Huron are hydrologically so closely connected that they are sometimes treated as one lake in scientific discussions because they share the same surface elevation through the Straits of Mackinac. Same system, very different personalities. That difference is exactly why the system matters so much. A linked lake chain can spread water, sediment, nutrients, pollutants, invasive species, and temperature effects across immense distances. It also creates a transportation artery far inland. Once canals and locks expanded access, ocean-going cargo could penetrate deep into the industrial heart of North America. Iron ore, grain, coal, and manufactured goods moved through this freshwater spine, helping build cities like Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, Buffalo, Toronto, and Duluth. Even today, the Great Lakes are not just scenic backdrops. They remain a working system, simultaneously ecological and industrial, where hydrology and commerce are tied together so tightly that one cannot really be understood without the other. If the Great Lakes show what happens when glaciation and drainage create a continental water highway, the African Great Lakes show what happens when tectonics split the land itself. This region includes major lakes such as Victoria, Tanganyika, Malawi, Albert, Edward, Kivu, and Turkana, among others. Several lie within or alongside the East African Rift, where parts of Earth's crust are being pulled apart. That stretching creates deep basins, steep escarpments, volcanic activity, and a landscape in which lakes occupy some of the most dramatic structural depressions on the continent. You are not just looking at water collected in low spots, you are looking at geology still in motion, expressed through lake basins on a massive scale. Lake Victoria is the giant surface reservoir of the group. At about 69,485 square kilometers, or 26,828 square miles, it is Africa's largest lake and one of the largest freshwater lakes in the world. Unlike Tanganyika, Victoria is relatively shallow, with a greatest depth of about 270 feet. That shape changes how it behaves. Shallow, large lakes are heavily influenced by winds, evaporation, and mixing. Victoria also matters because it is closely tied to the Nile Basin. The Kagera River is its largest inflow, and the lake feeds the White Nile system through the Nile outlet at Jinja. So this is not simply an enormous inland water body, it is part of one of the most historically important drainage systems on Earth. Tanganyika offers the opposite form. It is long, narrow, and extremely deep, extending about 410 miles or 660 kilometers, and reaching roughly 1,436 meters, or 4,710 feet, in maximum depth. That makes it the second deepest lake in the world after Baikal and the longest freshwater lake in the world. Its great depth means much of its water does not mix easily with the surface. In very deep tropical lakes, the upper layers can support most of the oxygen-rich life, while deep waters remain more stable and less ventilated. Now, that layering creates distinct habitats and helps explain why Tanganyika became such an extraordinary evolutionary arena for fish and other aquatic life. A lake that deep is not just wide habitat, it is vertical habitat too. Lake Malawi, also called Lake Nyasa or Lago Nyasa depending on the country and context, adds another dimension to the African system. It stretches for more than 350 miles or 560 kilometers and reaches depths of about 704 meters or 2,310 feet. Because of its length, depth, and temperature stratification, it contains a wide range of environmental conditions, and it is famous for its cichlid diversity. Britannica notes that more than 500 species evolved there from a small ancestral stock over millions of years. In plain terms, one lake became a laboratory of rapid evolution. Shoreline variation, rocky habitats, with sandy bottoms, depth zones, and isolated breeding niches all helped drive specialization. For a viewer trying to understand how a lake system shapes a region, this is one of the strongest examples on Earth. The basin is not just holding water, it is generating biodiversity at scale. Those lakes also shape human geography in direct ways. Fisheries support livelihoods. Ferries and boats connect settlements where roads are harder to build. Rift topography channels rainfall and affects local climate. Volcanic soils near some lake districts support agriculture, while steep escarpments and deep basins complicate transport. On top of that, multiple national borders intersect the water. Victoria is shared by Tanzania, Uganda, and Kenya. Tanganyika touches Tanzania, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Burundi, and Zambia. Malawi is bordered by Malawi, Mozambique, and Tanzania. So when you study the African Great Lakes, you are watching geology, ecology, transport, food systems, and political geography all overlap in one continuous water-dominated zone. Far to the north, Finland presents a different kind of giant lake system. It is often called the land of 1,000 lakes, but the real number is far higher. Finland has roughly 188,000 lakes, and more than 10% of the country's area is covered by water. That density comes largely from glaciation. During the last ice age, continental ice sheets scoured bedrock, deepened depressions, and left behind a landscape full of basins, ridges, and poorly integrated drainage. When the ice retreated, water filled the hollows. What remains is not one giant lake district in the simple sense, but a national-scale lattice of interconnected waters, especially concentrated across central and eastern Finland. The Saimaa system is the most famous example. Lake Saimaa is Finland's largest lake, but what people often call Saimaa is really a sprawling maze of linked basins, channels, islands, and shorelines in the southeast of the country. From above, it hardly looks like one lake at all. It resembles a flooded puzzle of rock and forest. That broken geometry matters because it increases shoreline length, creates sheltered coves, and produces countless local microenvironments. Water movement is slower and more complex in such a shape than in an open round basin. Ice conditions, fish habitat, boat routes, and settlement patterns all reflect that fractured design. You are not dealing with one clean bowl of water. You are dealing with an inland archipelago. Finland's lake country also shows how water can integrate with everyday national life rather than simply dominate it. Lakes regulate local temperatures, offer transport corridors, not provide drinking water, support hydropower and connected drainage systems, and shape recreation on a scale that is difficult to exaggerate. Summer cottages, sauna culture, boating, winter ice travel, and freshwater fishing all connect back to the geography of these waters. But behind that familiar human picture is precise physical logic. Water warms and cools more slowly than land, so large numbers of lakes soften nearby temperature swings. Forested watersheds filter runoff. Narrow straits and linked basins create natural routes through terrain that might otherwise be harder to cross. In Finland, the lake system is not scenery sitting beside the nation. It is woven through the nation. Canada pushes the idea of lake country to an even larger scale. Large parts of the Canadian Shield are covered with lakes of glacial origin, especially in the broad arc around Hudson Bay and across Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Quebec, Labrador, and the Northwest Territories. The Canadian Encyclopedia notes that nearly all lakes in this shield zone are glacial in origin. Thin soils, exposed ancient rock, and countless depressions left by retreating ice help explain why the landscape is so heavily freckled with water. In many places, there are so many lakes that road building becomes expensive and discontinuous, and aircraft or seasonal routes become more practical than direct overland travel. Some of Canada's individual lakes are enormous. Great Slave Lake in the Northwest Territories is the fifth largest lake in North America and the deepest lake entirely within North America, reaching depths of more than 600 meters. Great Bear Lake, farther north, Moss is even larger by area and is the largest lake entirely within Canada. Then there are major districts rather than single famous lakes: the lake-rich stretches of northern Ontario, the boreal shield of Manitoba and Saskatchewan, and the maze of shield lakes extending into Quebec and Labrador. These are not isolated exceptions. They are the surface expression of a continental bedrock province repeatedly reworked by ice. That glacial legacy controls more than appearance. It affects water clarity, chemistry, productivity, and land use. Shield lakes often sit in basins with little surrounding soil, which can mean relatively clear water and lower nutrient input compared with lakes in richer agricultural terrain. Bedrock channels drainage in irregular ways, producing chains of lakes connected by short rivers, narrows, and wetlands. For communities, that means travel and infrastructure have to adapt to the grain of the water. For wildlife, it creates migration corridors, breeding zones, and mosaics of aquatic and terrestrial habitat. For resource development, it means access, extraction, and conservation are always working around a fractured hydrographic map. In Canada's lake districts, the water pattern is the land pattern. You can also see an important contrast between these major systems. The Great Lakes are strongly integrated into heavy industry, binational governance, and large-scale shipping. The African Great Lakes are deeply tied to tectonics, fisheries, biodiversity, and transboundary livelihoods in rift landscapes. Finland's lake systems are more fine-grained and nationally interwoven, shaping daily life through dense hydrological networks across a relatively compact country. Canada's lake districts are broader and more dispersed, often less urbanized, with glacial inheritance written almost everywhere across the shield. Same general category, very different mechanics. That is what makes lake systems such a powerful topic. They are not interchangeable. Each one reveals the history of the land that produced it. There are other major examples worth noticing too. In Europe, Sweden's Vänern and Vättern, together with linked rivers and surrounding water networks, shape transport and settlement in the south. In Russia and northwestern Eurasia, Lake Ladoga and Lake Onega are giant freshwater bodies embedded in broader glacial landscapes. In the United States, the Finger Lakes of New York are much smaller than the systems we have covered, but they show the same principle in miniature. Glacial carving can produce whole families of lakes that then control agriculture, tourism, weather, and identity in a region. Once you recognize the pattern, you start finding lake systems everywhere, each one carrying the memory of ice, faulting, erosion, or drainage change. And that brings us back to the key idea. A lake system is not important just because it holds water. It matters because connected water multiplies effects. It redistributes heat, it links habitats, it moves goods, it creates shared shorelines and shared risks. It can turn a border into a trade route. or turn a geologic fracture into one of the richest freshwater zones on Earth. You can trace cities, fishing grounds, forests, even weather patterns, ferry lines, ports, and even national habits back to the logic of linked lakes. Look carefully at a map of the world's biggest lake systems, and you begin to notice that many regions were not merely settled around water. They were built by it. The Great Lakes helped organize the industrial center of North America. The African Great Lakes occupied tectonic basins that shaped routes, food systems, and biodiversity across a huge part of the continent. Finland's water web became part of the rhythm of national life. Canada's Lake Districts still reveal the raw imprint of Ice Age power on a continental shield. The water is connected, and because it is connected, its influence reaches much farther than the shoreline. Be curious and always seek to learn something new. Subscribe and see for yourself. Thanks for watching.